My name is Ruth Delaney, and I was 39 years old the morning I sat at my kitchen table and watched my phone ring 6 times in 4 minutes. 6 calls, all from the same number, my brother Garrett's number. I let it ring. I already knew what it was about. The letter from the estate attorney had arrived the day before. Thick envelope, cream-colored, the kind that costs extra at the post office. I'd read it 3 times at the kitchen counter without sitting down. Then I'd sat down and read it twice more. My father had left me the house. The whole house. 14 Birchwood Drive, Crestfall, Ohio. 4 bedrooms, a half-acre lot, the back porch where he used to drink his coffee before anyone else was awake. Appraised at $440,000. He had left Garrett and Marcus nothing. Nothing except a letter. 1 page each, handwritten, sealed, their names on the front in Dad's careful block printing. He had known exactly what he was doing. He had known for years. My phone rang a 7th time. I turned it face down on the table and finished my coffee. Welcome to her silent triumph, stories about the women who are written off, talked over, and left to eat their dinners alone at the children's table of their own families. The ones who don't raise their voices. The ones who just wait and work and let the paperwork do the talking. If you've ever been the quiet one who everyone underestimated, you're exactly where you belong. Drop a comment and subscribe because this one is going to land differently. I should tell you about my brothers first. Not because they deserve the airtime, but because the story doesn't make sense without them. Garrett is 46. He sells commercial real estate in Columbus and drives a white Escalade with heated seats that he mentions approximately twice per conversation. He married a woman named Trish who coordinates charity galas and refers to their house as a property. They have 2 kids in private school and a lake house they call the cabin, even though it has a sub-zero refrigerator and a heated pool. Marcus is 43. He manages a chain of auto detail shops and has very strong opinions about what cars are worth respecting. He and his wife Sandra have 3 kids, a loud house in Crestfall's newer development on the far side of town, and a standing Sunday dinner with Mom's side of the family that I haven't been invited to in 6 years. Then there was me, Ruth, the youngest, the one who stayed. I was a dental hygienist for 12 years before I got my associates in business administration at night, 3 semesters, 1 class at a time, while working full days. After I graduated, I took a position at the front office of a family dental practice in Crestfall. Office manager. Payroll, scheduling, insurance billing, supply orders. The kind of work nobody mentions at Thanksgiving because it doesn't have a name that sounds impressive when you say it out loud. I lived 11 minutes from my parents' house. I drove those 11 minutes approximately 400 times in the last 6 years of my father's life. Grocery runs when Mom's hip was bad. Pharmacy pickups. Lawn mowing, because Garrett said he'd handle it, and then didn't for 3 months one summer until the city sent a notice. Doctor's appointments when Dad started forgetting which medications he'd taken. The night he fell in the garage, and I was there in 9 minutes because I was always 11 minutes away. My brothers came for Christmas, both of them, every year with their families and their noise and their opinions about the thermostat. They'd been talking for 4 years about adding onto the house, converting the back porch into a sunroom, selling the place once Dad passed, and splitting the proceeds 3 ways. Garrett had already looked up comparable sales. He'd mentioned a figure, $380,000 at the time, which was before the market shifted, at the Christmas dinner table, while Dad was sitting right there eating his green bean casserole. Dad didn't say anything that night. He just ate his green beans and looked at the window. I washed the dishes afterward. Garrett and Marcus watched the game. The decline started in the spring of the year Dad turned 74. Not a sudden thing. Gradual, the way fog comes in, you don't notice it until you can't see the yard anymore. He started repeating himself in conversation. Not dramatically, just small loops, asking the same question about my drive over within 20 minutes of the first time. Then he started calling me by my Aunt Patricia's name occasionally. Patricia had been dead for 11 years, but apparently some part of his memory still had her in the active file. Mom told Garrett and Marcus. I know she did because she told me she had. Their responses, as relayed to me by my mother with the careful neutrality of a woman who had been moderating between her children for 40 years. Garrett said he'd call the doctor. He didn't. Marcus said he'd talk to some people he knew. He didn't. I called the doctor. I set up the appointment. I drove Dad there on a Tuesday morning in April, sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes, and then drove him home and made him lunch because he'd skipped breakfast. Over the following 2 years, I did this approximately once a month, sometimes twice. Neurology appointments, cardiology for the irregular heartbeat they found at the first neurology appointment, the hearing specialist because it turned out part of what looked like confusion was simply that he hadn't been hearing half of what people said to him for years and had been nodding and hopping for the context. I set up a medication organizer. I labeled it with the days of the week in large print. I drove over twice a week to check that the compartments had been opened in the right order, because Dad would say he'd taken his pills and then look vaguely uncomfortable when I mentioned which day it was. Garrett called my father on his birthday and at Christmas. He visited twice in 2 years, once with Trish and the kids for a long weekend, once alone in October when he was in the area for a work thing. He stayed for dinner. He mentioned the house again, the market, the sunroom idea, what a shame it was that the back gutters needed work, and then left at 8 o'clock because he had an early morning. Marcus lived 40 minutes away and came over for Easter and Thanksgiving. Both times, he spent part of the visit in the backyard with his phone, walking slow circles in the grass, talking to someone about work. He was always talking to someone about work. I was there, every week, making the 11-minute drive, checking the pill organizer, watching my father sit on his back porch with his coffee, the one quiet hour before the house woke up, and I'd sit in the kitchen and hear him through the screen door, talking sometimes to himself or to something I couldn't see. Old memories, probably. The kind that stay even when the new ones won't stick. He knew I was there. He always knew. One afternoon in his second-to-last summer, he asked me to sit with him on the porch. We didn't talk much. The light was coming through the maples the way it does at 5 in the afternoon in late August, that particular gold that makes everything look like it's already being remembered. He had his coffee. I had a glass of water. He said, "You know what you're worth, Ruth, even if nobody tells you." I said, "I know, Dad." He nodded. He drank his coffee. Neither of us said anything else for a while. My father died on a Thursday morning in March. He was 76. My mother had called me at 5:47 a.m. and I had arrived at 6:11. I know the times because I looked at my phone when it rang and I looked at my car clock when I pulled into the driveway. He had passed quietly, in his sleep, the way people always say they hope to go. Mom was with him. I was there 11 minutes later. Garrett arrived that afternoon. Marcus came that evening. There were arrangements to be made, the funeral home, the obituary, the calls to extended family, the catering for the reception, the flowers. I handled most of it, not because I was assigned to, but because I was there and I knew where things were and I knew who to call. At the reception after the burial, Garrett and Marcus stood together near the food table for most of the afternoon. They talked to people I didn't recognize, relatives from my father's side I'd met maybe twice. At one point I heard Garrett mention the house. Not the specifics, just, "We'll figure out what to do with the place." He said it the way you'd say, "We'll figure out what to do with the car." Like a logistics problem, like a line item. I didn't say anything. I refilled the coffee. The letter from Morrison Estate Law arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. One thick envelope addressed to me, and 2 thinner ones, one for Garrett, one for Marcus, mailed to their home addresses simultaneously, per my father's instructions. I didn't call anyone. I read my letter, and then I sat with it, and then I called the estate attorney, a woman named Joan Morrison, who turned out to have a voice like someone who has delivered difficult news so many times that difficult news has simply become news. She walked me through it efficiently and without drama. My father had revised his will 14 months before his death. He had done this alone. He'd called Joan's office directly and made an appointment and come in by himself on a Wednesday morning. Mom had not known about it at the time. He had told her afterward, but only told her the general shape of it. that he had made arrangements he was comfortable with, and that she should trust him. The will was straightforward. My mother would live in the house for as long as she wanted or was able. The house was hers for that duration. Full rights, full occupancy, nothing conditional. After her, the property transferred to me outright. A separate bank account, $28,000, saved methodically over the course of years, was left to me specifically for the maintenance and upkeep of the property in the interim, so that I would not bear that cost alone the way I had been bearing it already. Garrett and Marcus each received a personal letter, and a wristwatch each, one that had belonged to my father's father and one his own. Personal objects, chosen deliberately. No cash, no house, no share of the estate. Joan told me my father had been explicit and precise in his reasoning, documented in a separate letter to be held by the firm. The house would go to the person who had cared for it, and for him. He did not want the property sold to solve other people's financial problems. He had watched it happen in his own family when his parents died, and he had decided it would not happen here. He had been evaluated for cognitive capacity at the time of signing. 2 witnesses, everything notarized. The document was clean. He had planned this the same way he used to plan his garden, quietly, in the early morning, before anyone else was awake. Garrett called 11 times before I picked up. Ruth. His voice was the voice he used with difficult clients, the one calibrated to project calm authority over something he was actually furious about. I need to understand what's happening with the estate. You received the letter. I received a letter that makes no sense. Dad was toward the end, he wasn't always. He had a capacity evaluation done at Morrison Estate Law 14 months ago. I have the documentation. A pause. You knew about this. I knew he'd updated his will, not the specifics. Ruth, a longer pause, I could hear him breathing. That house is worth the market right now. I know what it's worth. We should talk about this as a family. And there it was. Family. The word that always appeared when someone wanted to use togetherness as leverage. I had heard that word deployed at Christmas dinners and funeral receptions, and in text messages that started with just wanted to check in and ended with a request. I said, I'm not selling the house, Garrett. Mom is 74. She can't. Mom is going to live there for as long as she wants. That's what Dad intended. And when the time comes, I'll handle whatever she needs, the same way I've always handled it. Silence. You're doing this out of spite. I looked out my kitchen window at the maple tree in my backyard, the one I'd been meaning to have trimmed for 2 years. A cardinal was sitting in it, just sitting there, very still in the January light. No, I said. I'm doing this because Dad asked me to, and because he knew I was the right person to ask. I hung up. Marcus called an hour later. His approach was different, softer, more wounded, the angle of someone who wants you to feel like you've hurt them so you'll give them what they want. I just don't understand why he didn't tell us, Marcus said. We're his sons. We deserve to know what he was thinking. He told you what he was thinking. It's in the letter he wrote you. I haven't been able to read it yet. I waited. It's hard, Marcus said. Losing him, this is just a lot. It was a lot. It had been a lot for years. I didn't say that. I understand it's hard, I said. I miss him too. We could at least discuss. Marcus, I kept my voice quiet, even. The way Joan Morrison's voice was, just information, just the facts. There's nothing to discuss. Dad made his wishes clear. He had full legal capacity when he did it. Mom is going to stay in the house. I'm going to take care of her the same way I've been taking care of both of them for the past 6 years. Nothing about that is changing. 6 years. A short sound that might have been a laugh. Ruth, we all contributed in our own ways. I know, I said simply, because I did know. They had contributed Christmas visits and phone calls and opinions about the gutters. And I had contributed 11-minute drives 400 times and Wednesday afternoons at the pharmacy and 5:47 a.m. Phone calls answered on the second ring. We both knew which contributions had mattered most. I have to go, I said. Give Sandra my love. Joan Morrison had told me something during our first meeting, that I'd written down in the small notebook I keep in my purse. She said my father had told her when he came in that Wednesday morning 14 months before he died. Ruth won't ask for recognition. She won't even notice she's not getting it. That's exactly why she needs to be protected. I'd read that sentence 4 times. He had seen it, clearly, the whole picture. He had understood not just what I was doing, but why no one was acknowledging it, and he had decided to acknowledge it the only way that couldn't be argued with or overridden or talked down at the Christmas dinner table. He had put it in a document. He had had it witnessed and notarized and filed with an attorney, and he had made sure it would arrive in a thick cream-colored envelope 3 weeks after his funeral, after everyone had cried and eulogized and gone back to their regular lives. He had done for me what I had always done for everyone else. He had paid quiet attention. He had made the arrangements. He had shown up, in his own way, 11 minutes after the call came. The house at 14 Birchwood Drive has a back porch with a screen door that sticks in humid weather. There's a prism hanging in the kitchen window that throws small rainbows across the linoleum on sunny mornings. The maple in the front yard turns a particular shade of orange in October that I have been looking at since I was 7 years old. My mother still has her coffee there in the mornings. She's doing well. Her hip is better. She has a neighbor named Carol who comes on Tuesday afternoons, and they watch a cooking show together and argue pleasantly about whether you can substitute Greek yogurt for sour cream. I drive there twice a week, 11 minutes. Sometimes I stay for dinner. Sometimes I just drop off groceries and sit with her for a while on the back porch. Last spring, I fixed the screen door. I found the right replacement spring at the hardware store on Route 9, and I installed it myself in about 40 minutes. It closes smoothly now, the way it's supposed to. Dad would have appreciated that. He was particular about doors. Garrett called once more in April, 2 months after the estate was settled. He had consulted a lawyer of his own, he said. He'd looked into contesting the will. I let him finish. You can pursue that, I said. That's your right. Joan Morrison's firm has the capacity evaluation documentation, the witness signatures, the notarization, and the written letter my father left explaining his reasoning. All of it is preserved and on record. I have certified copies. A long pause. He barely knew what day it was the last couple years. The evaluation was conducted 14 months before he died, when his neurologist had documented his cognition as within normal range for his age. Joan has that documentation too. Another pause, longer. This is going to cost me a lot of money, he said. He meant the legal fees to contest. I know, I said. I'm sorry about that. I was, in the way you can be sorry about a consequence you didn't cause. He didn't call again. Marcus texted me in June, just 2 lines. I've been thinking about everything. I'm sorry I wasn't around more. I waited 2 days before I replied, not to be cruel, just because I wanted to find the truest thing to say rather than the easiest one. I wrote back, I know, I think Dad knew too. That's probably part of why he did what he did. Marcus didn't respond. I didn't expect him to. Some things are just true and there's nowhere to put them, and you just have to carry them. Here is what I know about quiet work. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need the dinner table to acknowledge it. It happens in the 11-minute drives and the Wednesday pharmacy runs, and the morning you find the right spring for the screen door and spend 40 minutes with a screwdriver getting it right. It happens in the moments that look like nothing from the outside, sitting on a back porch in August light, not saying much, just being there. The people who do quiet work know it counts. They count it themselves, in the private ledger that doesn't get shared at Thanksgiving. They count it, and then they go back and do more of it, not because they expect recognition, but because the work needs doing and they're the ones who know how. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, someone else is paying attention. Someone who notices what's going unnoticed. Someone who understands that the quiet workers are the ones keeping everything together, and who decides to make sure that, when the time comes, the paperwork reflects what's actually true. My father understood that. He didn't say it at the dinner table. He didn't make a speech. He didn't call a family meeting. He made an appointment on a Wednesday morning. He came in with his documents. He told the attorney exactly what he intended and exactly why. He had it witnessed and notarized and filed. And 14 months later, it arrived in a thick cream-colored envelope that answered every question that had never been asked out loud. Some people express love in words. My father expressed it in documentation. I understood him completely. The porch light at 14 Birchwood is on a timer now. I set it myself. It comes on at dusk and goes off at 10. Mom doesn't have to think about it. Last October, I sat out there with her on a Sunday afternoon, the maples at their most particular orange, the air with that cool and dry quality that only happens for about 2 weeks each year if you're paying attention. Mom had her coffee. I had tea. We didn't talk much. She said, "He was right about you, you know." I said, "I know, Mom." She nodded. She drank her coffee. A cardinal landed in the maple at the edge of the yard, very still, watching us. We stayed until the light changed. That was enough. It was always enough. The quietest love in a family is sometimes the only one keeping watch. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone builds it into the paperwork before they go. That's my story. One back porch, one thick envelope, and a father who paid attention when nobody else did. If it reminded you to notice the quiet workers in your own life, really notice them, not just at funerals, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, subscribe to her silent triumph, and I'll see you in the next one.